Well, folks, thanks for tuning in. Start of another week, and we're seeing right off the bat a number of the items that we raised on Saturday that I pointed out to things to be watching for this week are certainly unfolding. Look at what's happening in terms of all the attention on Cuba and the fact that Canadian media seems to be blaming the U.S. for the problems of poverty and all the terrible low standard of living in Cuba. So Canada likes to try and blame the US for that, when in fact it's the results of communist economics and a communist regime that have for decades kept the poor Cuban people poor. Canada doesn't like to admit that. As a matter of fact, Canadians support the communist regime in Cuba more than any other country. And now it's being said that because the US is cutting off oil to the communist regime, that that's the reason things are tough. I wonder how Canadians are going to react as news continues to emerge that Russia, because it is losing so many soldiers in the war, and Ukraine is really fighting back bravely and valiantly. So they're bringing in fighters from other parts of the world. And one of the countries that is sending fighters to Russia to kill Ukrainians is Cuba. So not only are we funding a Cuban communist government, we're actually funding, through Canadian dollars, we are funding the movement of communist Cuban soldiers to Russia to kill Ukrainians. Let's try and get our heads around that if we can. Another faux pas that's being made or being criticized somewhat in Ontario, this has nothing to do with Cuba, of course, but in the ongoing battle relative to universities which are intensely culturally Marxist and do not allow students to have true freedom of speech and freedom of debate. The cancel culture is alive and well. And it appears, unfortunately, that with the government in Ontario under Premier Ford, and he's quite rightly concerned about the cost to students of education, so he is giving more money to the universities there in Ontario, and he's also lifting the tuition freeze that has been in place. That's been a freeze that has protected students from having their tuition rates skyrocket and be raised by universities that continue to increase in cost. The university network, billions and billions of dollars, in terms of public institutions, is one of the ones that is the least scrutinized in terms of spending. Most government agencies, quite rightly, have to be audited very strictly and monitored and have to explain all their increases in cost. Universities, the university universe as a whole, gets the least scrutiny on that. So where Prime Minister Ford may have missed an opportunity, he has not demanded of universities that they make sure they allow for true freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and a moving away from this forced woke ideology that actually dampens the intellect of students and forces them just to comply just so they get through their courses. So possibly a good move by Premier Ford in terms of wanting to see something happening better in the universities, but he's allowing universities now to raise tuitions at the same time as they get more money, and to do it all without a commitment to academic freedom. So hopefully he has some time to retrack on that and see if he can't get back in shape. Well, Canada's also, our government's continuing fascination with China has been having some results, because it's just been announced that Canadians will now be able to travel to China without visas. That's a breakthrough for Canada. Now, it's not as maybe as shattering as we think, because many countries, including many European countries, citizens are allowed to travel to China without visas. But this is a big bump upwards in terms of Canada and its relationship to China. And as much as you know, I have huge problems with the communist regime, one of the most vicious regimes in the world in terms of human rights. If you get the chance to go to China to visit and to tour, it's fascinating. You're going to have your mind blown, especially on the length of time it takes to complete major construction projects. You're going to be impressed with their infrastructure. And when you compare the time it takes, and I'm not talking about the approval process, just the time it takes to construct things there compared to, let's say, Canada and the US. I know we often talk about, my wife and I talk about the fact that in our beautiful town of Kelowna, there was near our place, it took over 2 years for one little traffic circle to be completed. And in China, they built the Beijing to Shanghai high-speed rail in about 2 years. So really amazing. There are some things that can be learned in terms of production and quality and also culturally. So that's, you're going to see traffic, tourist traffic to China picking up from Canada, even as the tensions increase there. Japan just over the weekend has seized a Chinese fishing boat. This has happened in the past, but it always raises the temperature, and has got now reaction from China saying they are now moving some of their Navy fleets closer to Taiwan as a result of this. So yeah, go to China, but keep an eye on Japan. One thing that's been interesting to see is the CIA has been actually doing recruiting into China because, of course, the massive amount of work that is required to keep everybody in line and to have nobody ever contradicting the government. This is when you've got a civil service and even the bureaucracy in their army, tens of millions of people, actually hundreds of millions of people, and you have to do everything you can to keep them under control. So the CIA has been posting videos in China and doing it very subtly and offering significant rewards for those who, either for reasons of really wanting to see freedom in China or maybe just wanting a ton of money, they're actually advertising to try and get people within China to start leaking information that will be hurtful to the communist China. Well, this weekend and over the last few days and last week, there's been something called the Munich conference. It's a famous conference, and those who may not be fully aware, it started back in 1963 when the tensions with the Soviet Union were growing and when Germany was being split in two, East Germany and West Germany, by the communists. And so the Munich conference was an annual, and still is a very important annual conference for people to talk about what they see in terms of security arrangements, how they continue to want to push back against some of these vicious regimes. And it's being said by people on the left and the right that Marco Rubio, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, really scored a home run in his speech. Some are comparing it to good cop, bad cop, with Donald Trump being posed as the bad cop who really gave a tough message at the World Economic Forum and really criticized European leaders as being weak and as being bringing in all kinds of standards and environmental rules that make no sense but cripple their own economy, and accusing them of just weakening against some formidable foes like China. So Marco Rubio didn't exactly back off on that, but he really made the message clear. He said that the U.S. is really a child of the EU, so he warmed a lot of hearts there, going back over 250, 300 years in terms of some of the United States historical and cultural roots, and talked about the fact that they can work together, but he still pushed them pretty hard on the fact that they stifle themselves, they hurt themselves in terms of some of their regulations and some of their relationships. So he's saying, look, the U.S. still wants to be strong and great partners. There's just some things we have to recognize about each other in terms of our differences. So he scored big points over there. Interesting, another person who showed up and made a presentation, the famous AOC, and she, of course, is, some people are saying that she will be running and wants to set up her run for the presidency for the Democrats, and her speech, of course, was criticizing the U.S. So she didn't get quite as much as attention, because her comments were seen as predictable, but very interesting. If you're going to be running for president in the U.S., then you want to be able to show you can handle some foreign affairs issues. So there was Alexandria Cortez over there and making her mark on the foreign field. The one thing that's been getting a bit of attention in Europe also, and we commented on this last week, and so you heard it first here, but you're getting more attention now, and that's the fact that Switzerland in June is going to be coming up with, they do so many things, they decide them by referendum there. It's a highly democratic country, and they are worried about the immigration rates continuing, illegal immigrations from third world countries just flowing across the borders. And so the way they're going to deal with it, because they don't want to be seen as anti-immigrant, they're going to be voting on should they have a population cap of 10 million. They're at about 9.1 million now. What is already being perceived is many people are also and have been moving to Switzerland from other parts of Europe because Switzerland runs a pretty tight ship as far as government spending. They keep it under control. They keep taxes down. They keep their regulations in line. Very successful country and following those guidelines. And so that draws people from all around Europe who are European and not coming from other third world countries. And they could be hurting themselves if they are cutting off other Europeans coming there. Also shows that jurisdictions, whether you're a country, whether you're a province, whether you're a state, if you run good government, you keep your spending under control, you keep your taxes down, you're going to have people moving to your jurisdiction that like that, people who are well-educated, well-trained, and hard-working. So they could be, maybe, as they say, could they be cutting off their nose to spite their face there? We're going to watch and see how that actually happens. It's going to be an interesting one. Well, as we look at some of the other emerging items, you see with anybody from the United States or not from the States has been watching a virtual war in Minneapolis with the so-called ICE agents, with the clamping down on immigration there and how that spilled onto the streets. And it's actually the way, especially with the fact there have been 2 citizens have been shot there by ICE agents and all kinds of debate going on that. It is hurting Trump's ratings in terms of the way mainstream media is reporting it. And so it seems like he may have pulled things under control by having Tom Homan, who's his head of Homeland Security issues and border issues, went there, and he's apparently got a deal now with the officials in Minneapolis. What they've always said, what Homan has always said is, listen, you declare yourself a sanctuary city. That means you don't allow federal agents to come into your facilities and pick up the people who are there already in jail. They're already in jail. They're illegal, and they've done violent, vicious crimes against children and sex crimes. And you're not letting us into the jails to go get them, so we have to try and arrest them on the street. And apparently a deal has been struck. Finally, if this is true, it would be good news that these ridiculous sanctuary city policies, which don't allow for the worst criminals. We're talking about the killers, we're talking about murderers, we're talking about, yes, rapists, we're talking about sexual exploitation of children. They wind up getting protected in these sanctuary cities. Other cities that don't declare themselves sanctuary cities, they allow ICE agents to come make their application through the courts, pick these people up who are in jail already, and then deport them from the country. So we're going to see if that's going to bring peace and cause things to slow down a bit. The other observation, if you're not applying these policies correctly, as we're seeing in the U.S. and some of these areas, people are generally agreed, if you can keep the focus on the fact that they want to deport illegal aliens, illegal immigrants. So they got into the country illegally, and then while they're in the country, they have done the most serious crimes, the high violent murder, rape, sexual exploitation of kids. Those are the ones that citizens want out, but how you get them out is proving to be important. And in South Texas now, the warning is out that South Texas, which has always been very strong Republican, a true red state or red portion of the state, may be losing that ability, may be losing support for the Republicans, because the ICE agents are going to some of the building sites which hire many immigrants. Let's face it, some of these are illegal immigrants, and they're putting pressure, and they're going onto these building sites and arresting people again. If you stick to going into the jails where they're already held, where they've already been found guilty before they get let out, you're going to maintain popularity for the program. But they're actually losing ground, even in Republican states, if they're seen as doing it the wrong way. Well, on the Olympics, Michael Kingsbury has won Canada's first Olympic with his amazing moguls performances. So people are happy about that, and people in Canada finally breathing a bit of relief, because Canada's way behind in the medal count. But where Canada is not behind, Canada's being accused of cheating in curling. And I know we kind of think, how can you cheat in curling? But both the men's team and the women's team, and now it's not just accusations, now it's been ruled that, when the person who's got the rock and they're going to be sliding it down the ice, you know how they slide forward on their knee and they kind of hold, you're allowed to hold that rock as long as possible until it gets to a certain line, then you have to completely let go. You can't guide it or touch it. So they've been accused of so-called double touching, major crime. And Canada's reputation there getting a little bit sullied as being called cheaters at curling. And the late night comedians, of course, are having quite a heyday with this, talking about, I won't get into the same detail, but, people touching their rocks and how they release and all that type of thing. You can imagine what the late night comedians are doing with that. And remember, Canada also going into the Olympics was accused of rigging certain systems so that it would, on a point system, make it more difficult for U.S. athletes to get in. So Canada under a bit of a cloud here, but still doing well, and we hope things kind of turn around a bit. And Sidney Crosby, of course, being one of the ones who can do that, one of the most popular hockey players ever in Canada and around the world. He's 38 years old, and he now officially has the record for the most goals scored in Olympic hockey. And his record is at 16. It was Jerome Iginla who used to play a lot for Calgary, who had the record of Olympic goals at 14. So there's Sidney Crosby, everybody's big favorite in Canada. In terms of, you got to have faith if you're going into the Olympics. So Jacob Slavin is a father of two. He's an outspoken Christian. And in his biography on his Instagram post, and there he is over the Olympics, he quotes a verse right out of the Bible from the book of Galatians, and he says, talk about all glory to God, so he's acknowledging his faith. So that's kind of interesting to see that. And Michael Jordan, getting away from Olympics for a minute, the guy who can win at everything. His driver by the name of Reddick, a very famous driver, just won the Daytona 500. And folks, even if you're not into race car driving, you want to watch the last lap of that race. Get it on YouTube. I'm telling you, they're going to make a movie out of it. Absolutely unbelievable finish that took place right there. In switching back to politics for a minute, shaping up in the U.S., and as you know, in California, some of these U.S. mayors that are being accused of completely destroying over the years cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco. And the person running to challenge the mayor in Los Angeles, and this is especially after the fires. So those of you who were watching TV back in 2007 to 2010 will be familiar with a show called The Hills. It was actually one of MTV's highest rated reality shows ever, and certainly at the time. And the star in that particular show is Mr. Spencer Pratt, and he is running for the mayoralty of Los Angeles. Now, it's interesting because he sort of played the villain in that series, but he was very popular and very well liked. Actually wound up marrying another star from that thing, Heidi Montag. And interestingly enough, they went through quite a torrid romance, and then they had a divorce, and then they reconciled, and they're still together. Anyway, he's making a run for mayor of LA, and he's challenging a lot of the policies like the free drugs on the streets, allowing the tent cities on the streets, He is for allowing ICE to come into the jails and take the worst of the criminals away. So interesting to watch how these major debates in Canadian or American politics sometimes they play out on the electoral cycle. Folks, stick with us, watch, give me your comments, and we'll hear from you tomorrow. Thanks so much.